All right, yeah. Sorry about the delay, guys. I am back now live. As you can see, you left me just as the way you left me here. New clothes, same motivation. Yeah, there we go. So, welcome to another one of Paper One sessions. I just gotta get that out of the way. What we're doing today is June 2024, Paper 1-1. So last year's June session. And as always, I've picked a subset of the questions that we have to attempt in Paper 1. So let me take you to it straight away. There you go. So what you see on the screen is basically everything that you need to do all the answers properly in your exams, right? So on the right of it, you see all the questions that you might see in a paper one. So you know that we divided into two sections. Section A will be four questions, all totaling up to 20 marks. Section B, two questions totaling up to 20 marks over there. So you're attempting for 40. And when you're practicing, your section A, your target should be to finish in about 30 to 35 minutes, leaving 40 to 45 minutes for your section B. So the questions that I picked for today are the ones that you see highlighted in blue. So I'm going to attempt a 2 and a 3 marker today from section A, which will ask us about industrial marketing and market growth. So very, very clearly marketing. And just notice in this, in section A, in all section A's, that the different questions will be from different units. And as you see here, this one, outsourcing and inventory, we know that's operations. Then there's salary and training, that's HR. There's marketing, industrial marketing and market growth, that's marketing here. And this one is objectives. So this is unit one. So even though there are 5 units, 4 different units are tested in section A alone. So you'll have, obviously they're testing the not just how deep your knowledge goes in 8 and 12 mark questions. They're also saying how wide your knowledge goes. So do you know all the things, at least briefly or not? So that would be a section A. And obviously we're attempting question number 3. And then when we go to section B, between the two of them, the second one was clearly the more difficult one. And especially because in 6 part B, you see a topic there that has a very high likelihood of being tested in your exams, the topic of budgets. Remember, budgets is one of the newer topics in your syllabus, and whatever is new is more likely to be tested. So that's why I particularly picked budgets. And I've also seen that, whenever in classes I discuss farming as a business, we don't go in enough detail about what farming is and how to use that example as application. So that's where this was a very good question, and I'm happy I'm able to do it today. So 3 and 6, that's what we're doing today. And just to remind you of what we are working with are these 4 writing skills that we need to show in our exams. So knowledge is the central concept that's being tested. Application is this particular type of business that you're asked to talk about. And in paper one, this is only true for 12 marker, in the sense that you'll be asked to talk about a particular type of business. But even in your 3 mark questions, your 5 and 8 mark questions, we still go through a process of application, right? Which means giving certain type of business context, or not just explaining, but also not just defining it, but also showing how a business might use that concept. And then analysis, which is the advantages and disadvantages to the business of that concept that is being tested. And then evaluation, which is reserved for a 12-mark question. It's a judgment or recommendation and such things. Okay, so with that knowledge, let's get into it. And let's start. Just need to clear up some space. Yeah, let's start with the first one, which is a 2-mark question. Okay, now how many marks are you given for knowledge in this one? How many for application? Or we only talk about knowledge here? What's the requirement of a 2-mark question? You got to help me do this, right? So 2 marks are both for 2 points of knowledge. So that's where you know that whatever the concept is, and in this one, it's not just marketing, it is industrial marketing. So any 2 things that you are able to say about industrial marketing, that's what you're going to get marks for. And You, by the way, two things of knowledge could also be in one long sentence, right? It means that you should have two different features of that concept in your answer there. I'll do it over two so that we're able to easily differentiate. Um so how are they different? How is an industrial market? What's another name for industrial market? Let's start with that. Rida, the other one. That's right, Ahmed. So industrial market is B2B. When one business sells to another business, right? So that in itself is a point to discuss. But that can't be the first thing I write. Because first you gotta explain, and then you basically, if you remember of a term that I've taught you, E-P. Hopefully you remember that, right? We discussed this. That first thing you got to do is explain it. So you have to define it. That's the must. And after that, any one out of four of the remaining. So there we have features, uses, formula, if that's one, and example. So you go through this checklist. First you define, and then any one of these four. So I'm going to use the same process there. And first I'm going to explain what my understanding of industrial marketing is. This is where a business sells to other other businesses uh, as opposed to selling directly to consumer. Okay, so that there takes care of this bit here. And then what is its features? So what do you do? An example of features would be that this is where you of businesses offer capital goods. If you remember your definition of capital goods are those goods which are used by other businesses to produce their own products from it. So you can either say this, and that will count as the feature side, and that's it, two things done. But if you didn't want to do features, you could do, let's say, uses of it. So why do businesses have to worry about industrial market? Because this basically opens up another segment or another revenue stream or another way to bring sales. So you could mention that, but you can sell directly. You can sell in large quantities. That could be one of its features. Exactly right, Orva. Or you could just also mention that this is also known as B2B. And don't just write B2B. If you use this, then you have to explain business to business. Obviously, I write in short forms. You don't do that. Okay. So, any two things about that concept, nice and clean, present it, and move on. Okay. Then we have a 3-mark question. Now, what are the requirements from the examiner from question number 3? What am I looking at? How many marks for knowledge? Yeah, very good. So you're looking for one fact about that concept and then another 2 lines or 2 statements to explain how a business might use it, right? So in this one, and I recommend this, even though I've been saying that do it just for 5, 8, and 12 markers, I think you can do this brainstorming additional step that I've taught you to do it for 3 markers as well. So when I, for example, start dividing this question, when I read this is, which is explain one implication to a business of market growth. So clearly the concept that's being tested is market growth. And they want to know one implication to any business. So any situation that you can use to explain to us what market growth does for a business. Okay, now it's somewhat important to understand that this question can easily be misunderstood, and you might think that this is where they're asking the benefits of market growth. It's not just asking for benefits. The word there is implication, which means that when a business decides to grow in any market, right, or the market it's outside it grows, how can that have any impact on the business? So let's say if this is the initial market size, right, and this is your small business here in the middle. They're saying, well, if this grows, right, and let's say the market size become this much. And when I say market size, it means my number of customers. So if that number grows and there are more customers coming in, what does it mean for the business? So important to understand conceptually what they're asking. They're not asking what are the benefits. They're asking if this happens, how does a business get impacted or what are the implications of it. Okay, so they have a chance for higher sales, absolutely, but mentioning that would count as your point of knowledge. So right away you can do that, and there are many things, right? So you could say that there are more customers, therefore you have a potential for higher sales. But Urva, when you mention higher sales and higher profit, it sounds more like the analysis part. What you have to do is just sort of explain the application first. And what does it mean for the business? You will say the demand of the product will rise and the company may have to increase its output. So that's the way to explain that. You don't have to explain the benefit of yet, because this is a 3 marker, not a 5 or an 8 marker. Okay. So Misha, when you say can raise brand awareness, see, brand awareness is a result of the company making an effort to promote themselves more, right? So just because a market size has grown does not mean that your product is also going to be popular with it, right? You have to do something to make it more popular, right? Yeah. So what I could say is that you may see an increase in the demand for products. Okay, so that's one way to do this. I'm going to do a parallel answer with it as well, so I can show you how you can develop 2 points with it. So let's say another point would be that you might see a decrease in the average cost, right? So these are two things that you could talk about. So how would I do it? Again, if I take my first point and I bring it over 2 layers of application, again, I'm switching back to black. So you know that this is that answer. So you see an increase in demand. What that means is now you have to explain that when market grows, there is a new customers enter, which is your potential customers, right? So explain it like that. And what that does is that with the right promotion, you may see an increase in the demand for product, and you may also have to increase the output. So that's one way that I could do it. Need of finance to cater, absolutely. So I could talk about that as well. But first, I want to do about average cost, right? So what happens here that when I look to increase my production level in order to cater to everyone, then my average cost of production goes down, which means the company also starts experiencing economies of scale. So you could write your answer like this. And what Urva just said, I'm gonna maybe use that as a well. So you will need more finance, right? You can mention that here that you may need to increase the place side of your marketing mix, which means more shops, and that might increase your borrowing from banks, so more loans and an interest payment to go with it. Yeah. So Michelle, you can do that. You have to connect all three of them together, so you can technically do that. Okay, so each color obviously indicates a different answer. So this goes here, then this goes here, uh, this goes here, and this here, and then this goes here, and so you sort of get it, right? Everybody okay with that? Simple enough? I think we've had good practice. Oh yeah, one thing I recommend with section A, I think I've been saying it a lot. I seem like a broken record, but when you're practicing your section A's, what I recommend is for an entire year. So let's say to 2024, you have 7 papers. 7 papers have 7 section A's. Do all of them in one go. So give yourself one day. If it should take you 30 minutes to do one section A, 3 into 7 is 21. You need 210 minutes. So that's roughly 4 hours. So in a day, give yourself 4 hours to do all section A's of June 20 of the year 2024, and that's just a really good way to get really comfortable with a particular type of question, so 2 and 3, and you're also able to see different types of questions. When you do topical and all the 2 markers in topical, that's just the same topic, but your exams, it's a different situation. So do all section A's in a go. That's a good way to practice for them. Iman, that's hard to say. Okay, it depends on the threshold. It depends on the difficulty of questions. There are many things involved. But you need at least 72% plus to get a B, 80 to get an A. That's like roughly what you're looking at. Okay, I'm gonna move on to our 8 mark question for the day. Right. So again, this is a great question because it highlights a problem that I see a lot of students, or a mistake that I see a lot of pro students make. And let me read the question first. Right. The question is, analyze 2 factors which may influence a business's choice of sources of finance. Okay. Now, what I recommend, what you do every time is, of course, first remind yourselves of what the requirements are. And we know that, excuse me, we know that you are given 2 marks for knowledge, you're given 2 marks for application, and you're giving 4 marks for analysis. And you have to do this for 2 points. Right? That's what the question tells us. So I can translate this into a formula that I need to have 2 points, and each point should have enough for 1 mark of knowledge, enough for at least 1 mark of application, enough for at least 2 marks for analysis. As long as you can do that, you have your 8 marks answered for. And another thing to remember that is, with each point, your knowledge should be at least 1 statement, 1 line, application at least 2 statements or 2 line, analysis at least 3 statements or 3 lines. So you break down your answer into at least these 6 layers so that you're answering for all the parts the examiner wants to see. Um, yeah, exactly. That's what I'm doing over right now. So what I want your help with, guys, is, if we know that we have to answer for knowledge, application, analysis, and in this sequence, the next thing we do is divide our question into knowledge, application, and analysis. This is, again, I can promise you, this is the most critical activity in your 1 hour 15 minutes of your answer writing. If you take the time to break up your question and understand it, you'll never make a mistake. So when I read this, everybody, so that's one answer, right? Atsurva with a suggestion. Does anybody else think that either this or anything else is what knowledge is? Do you want to guess? I want you all to guess, or at least figure it out. Which word or which words in there are indicating this is what the knowledge part of the question is? Yeah, good, good, good. So that's right? So only things you can really explain in this one is sources of finance. So the moment you talk about sources of finance, you know that your 2 marks for knowledge will be gained over there. Okay. Once application is a particular situation that a business is experiencing, a decision, a problem, a solution that they're looking for. And in this one, what is the business trying to do? No, see, 2 factors cannot be can a factor be a situation? Don't think so. They must be doing something. Either they're expanding, they're producing, they must be doing something. So what is the business doing in this situation? They are making a choice, right? A business has to choose here. That's the situation they're facing, right? Absolutely good, good, very good, guys. So choice of sources of finance is what the situation is. And when you're doing that, The analysis then becomes, yes, Aryan, all of that, right? Bilkul sahi. But those two factors is then what your analysis is. That what are the two factors which may influence? So discussion of those two factors and how they might influence. So in a way, when I'm thinking in my mind, I go like this: that when a business is making a choice between their sources of finance, what are two factors that they must look at? Okay, now this question is not asking you about the types of sources of finance. Okay, please, you will talk about them, but that's not what the question is. The question wants you to analyze around the factor, that what are you thinking of when you decide to either sell shares or go take a loan or use your own savings before, for any form of investment that you want to make in the business. So that's the situation. And a lot of you have mentioned them correctly. So the time period you need it for, the cost of borrowing, the structure of the business, the number of years it has been operational, whether it's a public business or a private business, its ethical code and things like that, the legal structure, absolutely. So there are many times. So yeah, whether they're looking for short, so maybe the type of finance that should be linked with perhaps the size of business or the number of years. If it's a new business, then you know that you will be looking for short-term sources of finance. Let me talk about that point. Okay, actually, I'm glad you bring it up. So that would be my first point of discussion. But first, you got to set up your answer, right? So you start off with a definition. Here, obviously, that would be your sources of finance. Uh, and the way to explain this would be that sources of finance is money needed for startup, expansion, or liquidity management. Okay, so it's important to explain. It's because source of finance, although it's difficult to explain, but you know what those sources lead to, and they lead to money used for these three situations. So you explain that, right? And then you bring in your application, that wherever a business is looking to choose the appropriate source of finance, it must do so carefully because it will have an impact on the cost and the control that they may have in the company, right? That's what you look at before determining should I sell shares or not, or how much would a loan cost, those sort of things. And then when you mention the first factor, right, this is where my first point begins. That statement is what going to get you your mark for knowledge. Okay, so keep it plain, simple, to the point. The starting line of the paragraph or the point, it has to be a direct statement about what is the factor. So you will say something like the first thing. So you could say the first thing to look at would be would be the number of years in operation. Okay, so that's one factor. Size of loan, we can talk about that as well, right? So number of years it has been operational, and then you explain what that means. Okay, and what that means is that if you are a startup, right? If you're a startup, then you are still unestablished and you will have a no, let's say, track record, right? So that's one situation. Or yeah, so or low negotiation power and things like that. However, if you were an established business, and don't try to mix up your application as well. For example, in the last, when I wrote startup, I talked about unestablished markets, right? You don't have enough sales yet. When I talk about established business, try to talk about something else. For example, you have um, um, cash flow, like ample cash flow positive, right? Which makes you more trustable. So explain that situation. I gotta let somebody in. Okay. Right. And by making sure that you are looking at this reason that look, we gotta look at how many years we've been operational in, then you bring in your analysis that your new businesses, so the startups, they will mostly rely on own money, right? When people don't trust you, or they will have to give up a lot of control in the business in the early days. However, if you are a big business or established business, however you want to explain that, then you have options. You could go to a bank or you can find investors because big businesses obviously have the ability to pay back, right? So you're using that situation, and that's where depending on the size or that of the business, you may get let's say big business, so you may get your finance for expansion at low rates. Okay, so to sum up, this is my real point that I'm putting across to my examiner. That you need to look at the number of years you're in operation, because if you're a startup business, there's no track record. And if there's no track record, then you will probably have to rely on your own money, or if you give up more control, then you might get it. Although, however, if you are established business, you would have positive cash flow, which makes you trustable. And that's what opens up more options like banks and investors, because you have an ability to pay. This way, they can gain better finance. So that's no. So Michelle, if you mean this one here, so the first technical point, this first point, first line of knowledge, then you don't need to explain this further, because the next 5 lines are doing that for you. The next 5 lines are explaining knowledge. Think about it like this. In my mind, when I'm working on, when I'm writing these answers, what I'm thinking is that whatever I mention in my knowledge, right? So if this is my knowledge part, and this is what I'm going to talk about in the next part of my answers, then I'm using this to prove it in my answer. So all of this, for example, all this that I'm doing, sorry, this if this is looking dirty, I thought this might look nice. Now it gives me an opportunity to color. Blue, blue, blue. Here is some water. Um, I was making some uh, drawings with my daughter the other day. Can I show them to you guys? Can I show you what she did? Yeah, right? Yeah, I just thought about it. So, first of all, that's her in the background. Hello. And where were we doing this? Um, Damn, I forgot. You, I think. Wait, where do you do? Don't you have like notes and things here? I think, yeah, there it is. Yeah, here we are. Got it, got it. Don't worry. So, this is what we're doing. So, she loves Sky from Paw Patrol. So, that's her. Then, yeah, this is, that already the genes are being transferred to her. So, this is her making, I think she was trying to make pom poms. Yeah, I'm still as childish, baby, proudly. So that's her name, is Smita. Uh, she was forcing me to write with my other hand, so I did that. Then yeah, so did some of this coloring. So I did more some of this. He made all the random colors in the middle. Uh, and yeah, and then in the end, this one didn't end so well, I suppose. um Narazgi of some sort, I'm sure. What comes over kids is hard to say. Um, Look, Ahmed, it's better to break up both your points into two separate paragraphs. Look, even when I'm checking your answers, if I see 2 points jumbled up in one, it's very difficult to separate two different points of knowledge and two different points of application and two different points of analysis to award it fully. So separate it. That's a better way to do it. Right. Okay. So let's get back to what we are here to do, which is talking about sources of finance and the factors. So the moment I finish this, then obviously you change paragraphs as we were just discussing, Emma and I, and you talk about the next thing. And I think an easy point would be, sir, there's 1 mark for knowledge. Yes, yes, that's what. If that's what you mean, Michelle, that's right. Same for application and 2 marks for analysis in each point. The other point you guys mentioned a little bit earlier, let's talk about that. That it also depends on the type of uh, business structure. Okay, and that's where you can talk about two different types of business structures. For example, the easiest one here would be that if you are a private limited company, you only sell to FNF, right? So friends and family shares, which makes this a limited amount that you can raise. And when we talk about your public limited companies, um, by the way, can I show you another way of writing an answer, or should we stick to this one? Do you want some variety? Yeah. Okay. So just for this one, I'm thinking it might be a good way to do it. So let me show you. So what I'm doing here is that the moment I talk about private limited and limited amount, right, I can bring its analysis here quickly. That look, if you go for private limited, if you're a private limited company, that way you may be able to raise limited amounts, and that means that not a lot or no control is or limited control is given up. That's what I want to say. So limited control is lost, and you can use this for let's say short-term expansion, right? Less smaller business, smaller money, so short-term expansion plans. That's what you can do with this. However, if you were a public limited company, what you are able to do is that you can sell on the stock exchange, right? And this allows you to raise large sums of capital, and there is no payback of this amount. So if you are a public limited, this is how you will benefit from it. And so uh, I don't think the question is asking us about limited liability. You would talk about limited liability when the question is asking about the benefits of being a limited company, right? So here you're using the examples of limited company to sort of explain the other one. So I don't think that's applicable here. Yeah, yeah, I know, but I'm talking about the large sums, right? So you could say if you don't want to talk about no payback, what you could mention here is that you can still retain control, right? You don't have to sell 100% of your company just because you become a public limited company. Okay. Um, the first one, what I'm saying is that you only tend to sell to your friends and family, which means that the amount that you can raise is limited. And that's where you can use this to expand in the short term for like small needs, little upgrades in the business. And another benefit of doing that is that you don't give up a lot of control because you're basically trusting people. You're bringing in people that you trust. So I'm just using that as an example. Okay, another point I guess you could talk about here. Give me another one. The size of existing borrowing. That's a great one, right? So you could talk about size of existing borrowing. If you already have a lot of borrowing, banks may not trust you because you still have to pay them the older amount or pay to another bank first and then pay them. However, if your size of existing borrowing was small, then more businesses are likely to give to you because you will have less strain on your cash flow, and the bank will have less doubt about you being able to pay back the original amount and keep paying the interest. So that's another way to do this. Are we okay with this one, guys? Okay, moving on to our 12 marker final boss. That's right, Orba. Good, good, good. You are learning. So, things to remind ourselves of straight away: knowledge to application to analysis to evaluation 6. Okay. Now, we've discussed this before as well, that when I'm thinking in my mind how to divide up my answer for 12 marker, I usually divide it into three paragraphs or three equal parts, one going into the other. This would be number one, this would be number two, this would be number three. And each of the first two, very right, very correct, very correct. Yeah, that knowledge, application, analysis, evaluation, full package, knowledge, application, analysis, evaluation, full package, and then last one reserved for an overall judgment and evaluation, right? And again, you know, what remains the same is that you still have at least one line for knowledge, two for application, three for analysis, and a couple of lines for evaluation. You do the same thing here. One line for knowledge, two for application, three for analysis, another two for evaluation. And here you're looking for at least three different points of evaluation, three different things to say about that. And and again, this is just a recommendation. It's a ballpark way. All of you may have a different way of answering a 12 marker, and that's completely fine. But what's important is that you have a large amount of discussion based on evaluation, because that's 6 out of 12. And examiners encourage this, that don't reserve, or you don't have to reserve your evaluation all for the final paragraph. You distribute it among the answer, and that way you complete one full point and then go to the next one. Okay, so help me out here. Now we know that we need all four skills. Which word or which words in there are telling you that's what knowledge is being tested? Mm. Okay, we have one for budget, two for budget, three for budgets, and we are all correct. So budgets is the central concept that's being discussed here. So as long as I talk about budgets, I'll get my 2 marks for knowledge. Okay, what's application? Very good. So, what you have to talk about is a particular type of business, and that type of business is a farming business. So, whenever you see farming business, you think about things like fields, crops, farmers, machinery, maize, corn, soya. You talk about those terms. You talk about in farming, you have weather being a big part. You also know there are certain months that you have, when you sow the seeds, and the other months when you take it out of the fields and then you sell it in the market. So there are, there's seasonality. Basically, what I'm trying to say is farming business tends to be seasonal. Some crops come in early spring, some in late summer. So think about all of those things, and place your answer right in the middle of a farm. Literally, it's for a minute, maybe close your eyes and look around. If you're on a farm, what you would see are obviously animals. You'll see fields. You'll see trucks coming in, going out. You will have to buy fertilizer. You will also have to obviously have a large storage. Now these they don't have to be kept refrigerated, so that cost isn't that high. So all those things must, if you want to talk about application, talk about those terms as much as you can. Okay. um so what's analysis here? Yeah, very good, very good, very good, Fiza. So what you want to prove is that if a farming business uses budget, do you think it will lead to success for them, right? So is it important for success or the results of budgeting? That's also fine. And then evaluation, clearly that's just the end bit. Evaluate whether. If you think it is important, then say yes. If you think it's not important, say no. And if you have other suggestions, give us that what those might be, or what are the things that impact the decision of budgeting. For example, the skill of person who's setting budgets. A limitation of budgets is that they might be demotivating, right? Another factor of budgeting, for example, is depends on what type of budgeting method you're using. For example, it might be zero budgeting or incremental. So like those are things of judgment that you bring in the final evaluation. But first, what we have to talk about, and what I end up doing when I divide these questions into these words, then I sort of rephrase it every time, right? You see me making those black lines there, and then I'll do that again. Then, if a farming business is using budgets, explain how it might lead to its success. So the advantages and disadvantages. Now, this might lead to success, this might lead to failure. And if you think it will or it won't lead to success, give us a judgment on it. So this becomes sort of like a sequence in my mind that I'm going to use to frame my answer. Yeah, so again, your the skill of budget setter must be there. Also, the fact that budgets must be decided with both parties, the one giving the budget, the one receiving the budget, both parties having an equal part. So open communication should also be a big part, because if you give them something that they can't achieve or they can't maintain, then obviously they won't be very motivated to use that budget again. So those are the things that you're looking at. Okay, so first, again, if I have these three paragraphs, what I might do is that I might dedicate the first one for the advantages. I will dedicate the second one for the disadvantages. So couple on each side and then talk about evaluation. Or what you could also do is, I'll talk about two advantages, two disadvantages here. Or what I could have also done is that I would do one advantage, one disadvantage in the first paragraph, and you do the same thing. Excuse me, you do the same thing for the second one as well. So both are fine. Whatever you're more comfortable with, whatever flow you're feeling in that moment, that's entirely up to you. But just if you're having two or different arguments, make sure you're dividing them up into two different paragraphs. Yeah, so maybe how you might explain that is, since this is a seasonal business, in some months the workers may not be able to, uh, let's say, cultivate enough crops or harvest enough crops, and that may lead to your revenue budgets or sales budgets not being met. That might become demotivating for the workers. And for its evaluation, you might write, well, in that case, if a business used what's the third type, flexible budgets, Then in times of need, they might release some money. When they have extra, they might not. So that might become its evaluation. So let me show you, let me make that point up and let me show you how that might be done. So again, set up your answer first. Start by defining what you can. And in this one, you will explain what budgets are. Again, financial limits set by the finance department based on the requirements of each worker or each department. That's how budgets are assigned. And straight away, I always remind you of this, straight away bring in application. And this would be that when you are a farming business, right, you have to have sales targets, right? You'll need budgets for fertilizer, for example. The business may be seasonal, so you have to worry about that. And uh, basically all the things how you would explain why farming might also use budgets. And then you come into your first real point with knowledge. And here you might say the business, what's the advantage of budget? It helps you to stay on track, or let's say manage inventory better. um, and just any of those, or you can also talk about budgets being like a plan, right? So since they are a plan, they allow you to focus on what are the things that you must do, and then explain it through a farming business situation. For example, farmers need to monitor um, fertilizer levels, for example. I can bring that example here, or seeds or whatever, right? And by assigning inventory budgets, remember we talked about this, that you will have different departments will have different budgets, and by assigning different budgets, the inventory manager can plan purchases in advance, right? Or you could also mention, oh look, they can maintain a just-in-time system. Yes, Michelle, that I can bring that in as in the analysis here. That since you know how much money you have or how much you don't have in terms of your fertilizer and the inventory manager, the analysis of this would be that there is um, it discourages overspending, right, or over storage. And since we are in a farm, we can talk about that even the fertilizers may be perishable, or just the products that you store, they might be perishable. And this will reduce the chance of spoilage or things going bad, or rotting, and things like that. So what basically these budgets are doing is that they're allowing you to focus and keep your costs at a minimum. And you could say that also adds to the overall efficiency of the business. Okay. So that's like one advantage of budgets, right? We can talk about. I'm gonna do this briefly because I wanna finish this soon. Or you can think of another. Do you have to both or just one? So just one is enough. I'm just giving you options here, right? So this one here um, would be your first point, and you basically bring at least two of these advantages as we discussed a little bit earlier. So like I said, it reduces overspending, over storage. It helps you to stay on track. You are also able to keep your workers motivated and things like that. So any 2 points of knowledge there, and then frame about in a nice analysis. That's what you should be doing here. But before you finish this, remember you have to give a little bit of evaluation. Okay, and here you can talk about a limitation or you can talk about a support. And here actually what I'm going to do is I'm going to talk about it in support. And I can say that when if budgets are decided after two-way consultation, so that would be between the finance department and the inventory manager, right? This will make it fair that they will be given things that they can achieve, and that's something that will help to improve the morale or the motivation level, because it is always motivating when your targets are of a realistic nature. So you can talk about it in support as well. So, Myra, that I'm reserving it for the second paragraph, which I'm going to start now. If you want, I can talk about that point here. So here we've just talked about the first phase where you're supporting your argument for budgets. I obviously change paragraphs here. And then we bring that in, that workers tend to overspend, right? Um, so bring that here. More than needed budgets lead to overspending. Okay. Uh, yes, Bibu, that was one. That was one. Okay. I'm talking about now the disadvantage bit. And again, talk about farming. So let's say we talk about that there was a budget assigned to marketing to promote new crops that they might have cultivated, right? And mention a couple there. Maybe they're now selling soya. Just so then there's more flavor of a farming business. And excuse me. And by doing this, you might see that uh, when let's say sales are down, you might see irresponsible spending on promotion. Right, without really thinking about it. Or what you could have written here is that maybe you've given your sales team some money to go and entertain some clients, and even though their sales targets were met, they still had some budget left over, so they started giving their in-laws all the treats and all the money that they have left in their pocket. So just finding ways to overspend. Or you might also say another way to use application here would be that if a worker reports that some of the budget was left over, then the question might be asked, did you even need this extra money in the first place? And you may end up getting less money the next time you're about to be assigned a budget. So many ways that you can bring application here, right? And the impact of this is that when you see people overspending or being irresponsible with the money, right, it leads to uh, more finance being needed, right? Remember, this is short term. Budgets are made for either week, month, quarter, or annually, not longer than that. And this might mean that you may have to approach a bank for an overdraft, which is additional interest payment. Right, that's something that goes up. And that might actually lead to an increase in costs and a decrease in your profits. Another disadvantage could be budgets give you tunnel vision, in the sense that you are so hell bent on doing what the manager wants you to do that you may have an opportunity. You might be getting a good discount on each unit if you bought in bulk, but because you did not have the budget, because we were only going to buy in small amounts, you let go of a discount that you might have gained. So you could talk about it from that angle as well, right? So that's another disadvantage there. And before we close this off, let's evaluate this, right? And here we can talk about that since farming is seasonal, right? It is difficult to accurately budget. Sorry, something's wrong with my pencil. It is difficult to accurately budget, whatever, marketing or inventory and such things. And then I will go into my evaluation. Again, just want to remind you that at least have two reasons of discussion here, right? So two disadvantages. I've discussed one here that overspending. The other one could be like I just explained that um, you get tunnel vision and you don't see any opportunities that come your way. Unrealistic budgets may become demotivational for the business, for the employee, and that's when you see an increase in labor turnover and things like that, and more complaints. So there are many disadvantages. Club them together, at least two of them, and then form the second paragraph. And then uh, what I mean here is that since this is a 12 marker, just one advantage and one disadvantage is not enough. You have to give a balanced argument. So, whatever the first paragraph, whether that's advantages or disadvantages, don't just mention one advantage. Find 2 points of knowledge. If you want to use 2 points of knowledge with the same application and same analysis, that's fine. But at least give them two reasons why you think budgeting works. So, two reasons here why budgeting doesn't work. Budget have to set the selling price. Look, the selling price is more a discussion, a decision taken by the marketing department. So budgets are your sales target. In order to get that sales number, what price you should sell at, that's nothing to do. That has nothing to do with budgets. So I would keep budgets and prices separate. Okay, and then go into your final evaluation, right? Again, I'll remind you that whenever I'm looking for to finish my evaluation, I'm looking to go through a checklist, 4 words that I think of. Well, can I talk about this? Can I talk about that? And those were: first, decide. And please, this is very critical. The examiners don't like answers that end like, oh, they can do this, but they can't do this, or they should do this, and they also shouldn't do this. Budgeting is important, but it's not really important. That sort of on the fence argument is not liked by examiners. So you have to be decisive. Is it important to success, or is it not important? And whenever, again, we talk about things that offer importance, and the way this question is designed, your answer will obviously be that it's important because you don't want overspending, you don't want, all of that stuff. But it's not the only thing that decides the success of a farming business, right? So make sure your evaluation looks at it completely. Yeah. So I'm going to use this, so I can use this point for in your evaluation as well, right? But let me just go through this checklist. So decision, if your decision is yes, it's important, or no, it's important. Let's say it's no, then give a recommendation. How can they improve it, right? If it's a yes, then support it. Why do you think this was? Or if you think that because of this, there are other problems that might be created, or there are other problems that might come in the way of budgeting being um, effective for a business, that's where you talk about obstacles. And especially in these two, in support and obstacles, always try to explore, will this decision have an impact on any other department, or whether any other department might have an impact on this. So as a whole, what the business is feeling because of better budgeting in a farming business. Okay, so I start with the first one in terms of the decision. Is it important for success? Yes, but needs, first of all, accuracy, right? And how do you get accuracy? You have skilled finance specialists. If you have that, then you have a um, a good budgeting method. What you also need to have is the appropriate type. Okay, and you don't have to go in too much detail, but just you could mention is that you could have flexible, which might be obviously more suitable to workers, or you can do zero budgeting, but it depends on that. That's a big factor, right? uh it also depends, it's important, yes, but it depends on the availability of finance. Right? You can only distribute the amount of money that you have in your pocket, not the money that you don't have in your pocket. So that's important. So ability of finance, and it also depends on the objectives of the department. So if, for example, you can mention this, for example, that if operations has an objective of increasing output, then you will have a higher budget assigned to them. So that's something to consider, right? So it's important, blah 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 blah. Where I say, but I'm saying no, but I'm not saying that no, it's not important. I'm saying by itself, it's not the most important thing, because to be successful, you need, since we're talking about budgets, a good way to evaluate budgets is that go through the entire unit of finance, right? Look at what are the other things financially that contribute to a success of a farming business, right? So you will also have to talk about they talk about what's our second chapter, source of finance, cash flow. So the cash flow management, MGMT means management, right? That will also determine whether how good your liquidity is or not, and that's also a factor of success. What you also need is efficient farming methods, right? So obviously things such as tractors and technology and irrigation and things like that. So bring those words here, because they also contribute towards the overall success of a business. And anything else that I want to say about budgets? Are there any limitations of budget that I'm missing here? I guess we were talked about tunnel vision up front. Um, mhm. I guess worker involvement is essential. That would be a good way to finish my evaluation. Yeah, BB, that's fine. Yes, Abdul Ghani, that's what I did. Right? So working capital sort of I brought into cash flow, because cash flow talks about inflow, outflow, and that's what leads to your working capital calculation. So yeah, that's fine. Uh, oh, very good, Jivo. Yeah, I want to talk about that point. Um, we know that this is a seasonal business. Whatever farming it is, it will be seasonal. Right? So, difficult to accurately budget. Oh, yeah, one more point. You can use budget variance to evaluate performance and use for future. Right? Somebody a little bit earlier said you can use it for future. That's what I'm doing here. So remember budget variance, the calculation. Um, no, so Fiza, not either. In a question like this, look, the question was, is budgeting important to the success, right? Without budgeting, there can be no success, right? Because you can't have people overspending, you can't have not knowing how much money you have in your pocket, etc., etc. But budgeting just by itself does not also lead to success, right? You need other things as well. So what you're saying is, yes, budgeting is important, but don't limit success to just having budget. You need other things as well. So I'm saying all of the other things to just sort of highlight what other things are equally important. And that's a nice long answer. That's what I would do. Are we okay, guys? Any questions about this? Yeah, yeah, BB, that's correct. Um, Look, spend the same amount of time on application in a 12 marker as you would in an 8 marker, right? They're giving you less marks in a 12 marker for application, but that doesn't mean they are asking for less information. So try to use the same. That's why I start by saying this. 1, 2, 3, 2. 1 for knowledge, 2 for application, 3 for analysis, and 2 for evaluation. Okay, look, I don't think I have sample answers for this. I might do, so I'll take a look. Maybe I can share something, but I can share the answer guides, what I make. Yeah, baby, that's great. That's very good. Don't worry about taking screenshots, guys. I'm just sharing it on your wherever I have people on WhatsApp or Google Classroom. I'll share it on all of our methods of communication. So you'll get a nice downloadable PDF. Just give me 5 minutes. Again, Jeeval, the best thing I can teach you is this highlighting bit, right? As we highlighted farming business, if you can identify a situation where you will struggle is where yes, where a certain type of business isn't mentioned, right? For example, 8 marker, 5 marker, they might give you a situation within a business rather than the whole business itself. Even in there, just highlight and identify what action is taking place, what is changing, what is the business doing, and that action is your application. Yeah, sure, BB, that's fine. Send it. Okay. All right, guys. Take care. I gotta be on my way now. Thank you for being interactive. As always, it's appreciated. Next, I'll see you guys on Thursday. Yeah. All right. Thank you. Take care. Good luck with your studies. Bye bye. Love is.